Hello and welcome to this section on traits and code inclusion. So let's look at what you will be learning in this section. You will be able to understand what is traits, define and use traits and multiple traits in one class. You'll understand what is the difference between traits versus inheritance. Then you'll work with exercise, resources and quiz using the traits. Well, traits solve one problem in OOPS, that is the multiple inheritance. Previously in the inheritance section we saw that we cannot extend from two classes, right? A class can extend only one class. So if you want multiple inheritance, then that is not possible. So traits basically comes in and help us to solve that multiple inheritance. So we'll see the examples how it can help and solve this multiple inheritance. Okay, so that's this section is all about, to understand this concept and work with traits. Okay, so let's jump into the lecture and understand this traits concept. Hello and welcome to the lecture on traits. Let's understand what are traits and what problem the trait solves. Okay, so we have a limitation that we discussed in inheritance, that you cannot extend more than one class. Okay, a class can extend only one class, and if you want to extend multiple classes, it's not possible in PHP 7 as of now. So multiple inheritance is not possible in PHP 7 because you cannot extend from more than one class. Okay, to resolve this issue, you can create a class and use it into another class without extending it. Okay, this is the concept of trait, wherein you create a class but you don't have to extend it. You can just straight away use it in another class. Okay, how you're going to do it? You have to define your class as traits. How you can solve it? You have to define your class as traits. Okay, you don't define as class, you define as traits, and you can include multiple traits into your class, which solves multiple inheritance. So instead of defining a parent class, you can define a parent traits and then you can include them into your classes. Okay, and you can include them as many times as you want. Okay, it's like solving the multiple inheritance problem. Okay, so let's look at an example and then understand how to define it, how to include them. Okay, so let's jump into an example now. Hello and welcome to the lecture on traits. Let's do an example to understand how to create and use traits. For this, let's create a folder called traits and let's create a class. Traits example.php. So how do you define a traits? That's what we're trying to understand. Once you learn how to define it, you will also have to learn how to include it. So trait is a keyword using which you can define trait. So you can say database helper class. Okay, so this is a trait, it's not a class. It's a trait database helper, and you can define normal functions as you define in a class. Okay, you can say get records. Okay, and you can say echo here are your record set. Okay, and you have defined a trait using which you have defined a function. And imagine you have another parent class for your class which has already been extended. So you have no way to extend another class into your actual class. So in this case, you have to define your class as a trait and then include them. Okay, so let's see how to include a trait into your class. So let's see you have a class student. Okay, and the only thing that you have to do is you have to use a keyword called use, and then you have to pass in the trait name. Okay, and that's all. So using just say use and your trait name, and then you can get to call the methods of that trait. Okay, so let's say you have a function called connectDB. Now you can just say get records, just like that. Okay, because you have used the trait, you can get to call the methods on it using this keyword. Okay, it's almost like in class, is just that you are defining it as a trait so that you can include multiple traits, as which we'll look in the next lecture. Okay, so for now let's understand how to define and use them. Okay, so how to define a triad? Use the keyword triad, and you don't do anything fancy inside this. You just define like normal methods. Then how to declare them and how to use it? You have to use a keyword called use and then triad name, and then using this you can access all the methods of your triads. Okay, so let's execute this. Okay, so here are your records. This is coming up from your triad, right? And you're able to use it and you're able to call the method of it. Okay, so this is how you basically define a triad, use the triad, and call the triads. Okay, so that's all the lecture of what is triad and how to use it, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on multiple triads. So previously we have seen how to include one triad. Multiple triad is a very practical example in OOPs. Because PHP doesn't support multiple inheritance, you will keep coming back to this triad concept. Why? Because you will be having requirement where you want to include or extend more than one class. Okay, in those cases you will not be having any choice. You have to keep creating triads and then include them as many you want into your class. Okay, so let's look at similar example. Okay, so now you have database helper. Now we create another triad. So let's save this as example 2. Okay, and then we try to create one more triad called string helper, right? And we'll say remove spaces. I know there are methods for this, but I'm just trying to show an example. Okay, so trim is an example, and I'm just trying to show you an example how you can create multiple triads and use them. Okay, now the requirement is if these two are defined as a class and you want to extend them, okay, then you want to extend them, then you will always be challenged with this. Do I have to include database or string? Okay, and you will be stuck with this because multiple inheritance is not possible in PHP 7. Okay, so in this case you define them as triad and you can include as many triads as you want. Okay, it's very easy to work with. Okay, and you can also say echo. The same way you call the database helper, you can even call the string helper. So you can say remove spaces. Okay, so when you say connect DB, it's basically gonna remove the spaces for us. Okay, you see there's no space here because it has been trimmed. Okay, it's very simple and important concept that you have to understand, and you will be challenged with this challenge in any of your project, and the best way to come out of the multiple inheritance is using the triads. Okay, so understand how this can be defined and understand that multiple triads is possible, and the challenge of multiple inheritance is solved by triads, and you can keep using how many triads you want into your class, and then you can start using these methods as a normal class that you define and use the methods. Okay, so that's all about multiple triads, and I'm gonna see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome to the exercise section on triads. Let's do an exercise to see whether you have understood this concept or not. Okay, you have to create a triad for files operation and use it in the post class. Okay, the files operation could be get file size, and then you can use the file size function to get the file size. Okay, you pass the file name, using the file size method you can get the file size, but in the file operation you try to define that method called get file size and try to pass the file name and get the file size. Okay, and in the post class try to use that files operation and then try to call a method and then call the another method from the triads. Okay, so I will leave the implementation with you, but I've given some key concept. You can define any operation in the triads that you want to define, and try to see how you can define a triad, how to use it, and how to call the methods from the triads. Well, that's the exercise for you. So pause this video here and do the exercise now. So welcome back. So let's do this exercise. So you have to create a triad of files operation. You can say get file size. You can say file name, and then you can return the file size by passing the file name, right? Then you can write a class, post class. And how do you include a triad? You can say use the file operation triads. Let's write a method called check size. You pass the file name to it, and then you can return the $this get file size. You pass the file name back to this method, and then you create an instance of it, post 1 new post, then $post 1 check size post.txt. okay, and then we'll create this file. Okay, it's not post, it is posts. Okay, you can do an echo here just to print the check size. Okay, it's 20. That's the size of the post file. Okay, that's the content size. Okay, so it's most important how do you define a triad, how to use a triad, and how to call the methods, and how you work with it via the multiple inheritance. Okay, so that's the exercise on triads, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the summary section. Let's do a quick summary to understand what you should be able to do now. You should be able to understand what is triads, define and use triads, and understand what is multiple triads in one class, compare triads versus the inheritance, and also I believe you have worked through exercises, resources, and quiz to understand this concept better. Okay, so that's all this lecture on triads, and I'll see you in the next one.